Hey, welcome to episode 5 of the Retro Game Club podcast. This week we are going to make some crazy money. I am Hugh, and this is Rob.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming back for episode 5. We have tons of news, so I kind of feel like we should dive right into it.
Yeah, I think so too. I haven't been playing a lot. I'll just, for the record, say the only game I've played this week is the Kirby's Epic Yarn remake, because I spent like 10 hours on a plane.
I have not played that one. It is on my list.
Have you played the original?
No.
Oh. Yeah, I would say if you like 16-bit platformers, it's really just a 16-bit platformer with better graphics.
Well, I've been playing a topic of the week that we will use in the future, so I won't go into that now, but kind of a lengthy game. And a lot of Dreamcast games this week, but we'll get into that later.
Yes, we will definitely be talking about Dreamcast soon. But yeah, ton of news. There's been an awful lot since last time we recorded. Like, Disney is going to make a ton of Lucasfilm games.
Yeah, so they are back, and people are speculating what they're actually going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping they do a remake of that NES game where Darth Vader's actually a bat in the end. He morphs into a bat.
That's the original Star Wars game?
On NES.
I never made it to Darth Vader.
Never. Don't.
Yeah.
But I really hope they remake that one. No, but I mean, we could get some Indiana Jones games, Star Wars games, Monkey Island. It'd be great if they did an actual remaster of X-Wing or TIE Fighter.
Yeah, I mean, I think Disney seems content to make as many things with the Star Wars logo on it as they can get away with. Now, I'm sort of I feel like I'm in the internet minority of people who really so far have enjoyed all the Star Wars movies that Disney has produced.
It's better. It's better I don't talk about those. We will lose listeners if I start giving my feeling about the last one.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't overthink. Are you talking about the Solo one?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Last Jedi.
Oh, Last Jedi. Well, I actually was a big fan of that one, but you got to take them for what it is sort of my viewpoint. But yeah, I would assume I have to assume they've made a Last Jedi game, but I'm more interested, probably like you, in what they're going to do with some of the old franchises. Like, I don't think they can't do Lego Star Wars games again because they don't own the Lego rights.
No, but they could do like a mobile Yoda stories. You know, I mean, the Indiana Jones games were great. Most of them,
yeah.
You know.
Yeah, the adventure ones, not necessarily the maybe not the action ones quite as much.
Mm-hmm.
Although some of those action ones might not have been done by Lucas Films or Lucas Games, like Young Indiana Jones on. I have to look into like Young Indiana Jones on Sega Genesis was a different developer, but it was also like a platformer. Or if they could bring back like a Dark Forces remake.
That is some of the speculation. Now, the later games like Dark Forces and, the Xbox and the PlayStation games, I never really played. I tried, I got a Humble Bundle once, and it just didn't age well, and I didn't have that connection to it. So if they remake those, maybe they'll get some of my dollars.
Let's see. Oh, by the way, I have a shrink-wrapped copy of Yoda Stories for some reason. I'm not even sure where that came from. It's like...
Next story is one of mine. I was debating putting this on here because it's not actually retro.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this game, and it is called Creature. Or Creature in the Well, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a action RGP that integrates pinball.
So like Pinball Quest on the NES, but perhaps better.
This looks fantastic. Now, it's not a retro game, but the fact that they can integrate pinball in 2019 and make it this cool looking and retro looking at the same time, If you haven't watched a video for this, again, it's called Creature in the Well. Definitely check it out. I could definitely see a lot of our listeners being into this.
Yeah, the graphical style is like a, sort of a mashup of Out of This World and Icewind Dale.
Did you ever play that Transistor game? Came out probably 5 years ago. Kind of looks a little bit like that, but a little bit more 16-bit-ish, I guess. It's like a 16-bit color palette, but
yeah,
but better graphics than 16-bit.
No, I think it's perfectly acceptable to give out shout-outs to indie retro-style games on here. Definitely in scope.
Yeah. They say it plays a lot like Zelda, obviously with a major twist. You're hitting projectiles, trying to ricochet them into other objects, and a pinball machine. And, yeah, very cool. Not much more to say about it other than check out our show notes if you're interested in it and buy it when it comes out. Next one, building an emergency controller config reset button on your RetroPie.
Yes. This is one of the most needed things ever if you use RetroPie, because I eventually gave up on RetroPie because I got tired of constantly losing my joystick configuration. I don't know. Like, I think it's a great product overall, but I think there's maybe like a range of controllers that work really, really well with it. Like, I had one wireless Logitech USB controller. So not Bluetooth. It was like a USB to like a USB receiver kind of deal. That thing worked great, but the D-pad on that controller isn't very good. It has like, it's one of those controllers where the analog stick is good, but the D-pad is kind of bad. So I stopped using it on RetroPie, and any other controller I tried, I would constantly somehow lose the controller configuration all the time. So this has a guide on wiring in a button.
And it's a big red button.
Yes.
Pretty funny.
It is definitely a huge red button. Now, this might be a problem if you're using the RetroPie with one of the integrated screens. Like one of the Raspberry Pi integrated screens, because I think there's a conflict in the ports it's using. But if you just have it hooked up through HDMI out, then it's fine. And then it gives you a script here that every time you press the button, it executes a script that then gets you into the controller reprogram mode.
Yeah, this thing is going to save a lot of people a lot of time. I like the what you'll need list. Soldering iron, Raspberry Pi, jumper wires, solder, a switch, and a heatsink. Heat shrink rack tubing, sorry.
Yeah. And you might be able to get away without doing any soldering. But the nice thing is like they show this on a... Like, the reason this is good is because if you have a RetroPie like built into a cabinet or something where it's hard to turn it on and off or otherwise reach the control, whatever you have to do to reset the controller, this just makes it easy. So, like, this is exactly the kind of button you'd want. Even if you've never had controller problems, it's a good emergency button.
Because you're going to have controller problems.
Probably,
you're going to. Yeah, it's going to happen.
And it could be your own fault. I mean, it could just be like you do an upgrade and it wipes out the config or makes some change to the config where the old files are incompatible.
If anyone out there that's listening has tips on how they manage multiple controllers on their emulator setup, please write us, because I could use some tips, definitely. I have about 4 controllers sitting here, and I'm always afraid to plug in a different one. And, you have your Genesis-style controller, you have your PlayStation-style controller that you want to switch up for the different emulators, so you want to use them.
Yeah. I mean, on like my main PC, I use a Nintendo 64 controller for just about everything. That works for like 99% of things you'd want to play. Unless you can do a dual analog stick game, and then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Let's stick with Raspberry Pi. Another cool Raspberry Pi project is Raspberry Pi inside a Raspberry Pi keyboard.
Now, you think this is cool, right?
I do, yeah. I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner. It sort of reminds me of, some of these Kickstarter systems to do like Commodore 64 Mini, only the keyboard works.
Exactly. That's exactly why I wanted this in the show notes, because, I mean, this is the perfect DOSBox emulator.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could play all your old Lucas games on this.
Yeah, and for people who haven't tried it, DOSBox does work really well on the Raspberry Pi. And so does Doom. Obviously, you could run Doom in DOSBox, but there's a native version for Pi. It was Chocolate Doom. There's a port that works a little bit better than playing it in DOSBox. And this also has an emergency button, but I believe that is just a power button.
Now, does this take batteries or anything?
I would assume it has to, because I don't see any wires coming out of it.
Oh, yep. It has LiPo batteries, so lithium something batteries.
Yeah, so it's recharged. Basically, you're buying rechargeable batteries.
Hey, man, that's cool. And it has 3 USB ports, it looks like, if not more.
Well, there are 3 exposed. And then I'd say USB port for charging. Not USB, but the other, reverse USB, whatever you call it. And then the HDMI out, because obviously you need some sort of output. Now, this does require a little more... I don't know if it's to say skill. Like, I don't see a lot of, like, soldering and stuff. But there is a lot of, like, kind of precision cutting. Now, they're using, like, an X-Acto knife for all this. Maybe if you were extremely good with the Dremel, you could do it. But if this is not a project if you have shaky hands. Like, don't drink 8 cups of coffee before doing this.
Yeah, it looks like it's using the official Raspberry Pi controller and mouse. So I guess you got that, right? And this doesn't look like a very cheap project, other than it uses the Raspberry Pi Zero W, which, I mean, that's like $5 only.
It's $5.
Nice, yeah. Cool. If I didn't already waste all my money on stupid stuff for this month, I would get one.
Another kind of cool project. I think I maybe put this on the notes. SPECTRANET. Sorry, this is just... I don't know what I love about this one. Ethernet-based ZX Spectrum device to load games from the internet.
It's incredible.
So, yeah. It's it really is. I love these projects where they connect old computers to the internet.
So you're on real hardware and you're downloading real software. This is, if you were a Specky fan, this is everything you ever wanted when you were a kid.
Except you didn't have the internet yet, so you didn't know you wanted it yet.
Yeah.
You maybe knew a little bit about bulletin boards.
Now, as being an American, I've never even touched a Spectrum.
Yes, and we both are pronouncing it wrong. So any listeners in the UK, of course, are cringing every time we call it the ZX Spectrum.
Yeah.
So sorry, but that's very, very hard thing to reprogram yourself from.
Yeah. But I love people with their passion projects. I mean, this had to take a long time.
Yeah, and the person or group that made this, they got a little web shop where you can buy all kinds of custom things for the ZX Spectrum. It looks like they got memory upgrades, custom cases, adapters to hook up, different joysticks and mice. So they are really, really passionate about this.
And I'm guessing they're in the UK. I'm just guessing.
I would assume that. That would be a very odd thing to see in the US.
Yeah.
I'm sure somewhere there's a US ZX Spectrum fan group. They play ZX Spectrum, watch some Doctor Who, make Monty Python jokes. I don't know what else you would do at the ZX Spectrum meeting. Debate Brexit. I don't know.
We actually do have a Brexit story later on.
We do. For the record, I have no opinion on Brexit because I'm in America. I generally I try to stay out of American politics. I definitely don't want to get involved in other country politics.
Yeah. This next news item, I admit to not knowing much about at all. If you could take this one.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is just a new game. So we mentioned before, like, new games done in retro style. So this is a new Amiga game called Bridge Strike, which is, we'd say, heavily inspired by River Raid. And it's a game you can actually go and buy. You have to have the 1 meg upgrade for your Amiga, but chances are if you are running an Amiga today, you probably have that.
Yeah.
It has a CD version and a disc version.
Amiga floppy, yeah.
Amiga, yeah. Yes. And it is, I was about to say 11,000 euros, but it's 11 euros because they flip the period and comma. You would think for like all the years that I've looked at currency, like I would someday remember that the periods and commas are flipped. So that is really, really cheap. What's that, like $15 US?
Yeah, I think roughly? That's about right.
Yeah, so that's a pretty good price. And I think this developer has done a few other games too, and there's sort of like a list here of other, related games. But you can get the digital version or, it looks like a physical version. So,
and it comes with wallpaper and MP3s and concept art and a manual, and so you get a little bit of extras in there.
Yeah. So I think it looks pretty good. It's sort of, looks like it looks like an Amiga game. It's definitely got that kind of, color palette and appearance to it. Looks like it could be a Genesis game, which a lot of Amiga games do.
What's it called? Bridge Strike is the name, right?
Yes.
Bridge Strike.
Yes. So I think that's something cool to check out.
And again, are there a lot of Amiga fans in America? I think I only had 1 or 2 friends that had an Amiga. Oh. I only touched one in high school. We had one in our video editing class.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so in the U.S., they were very popular with, for lack of a better term, AV nerds. Mm-hmm. I was not an AV club kid, but I did have an Amiga 500, but it was more when I was like in my early 20s. Mm-hmm. And I just got it for gaming. And it is a really good game system. I think it's great for that. But no, I mean, it didn't really compete with PC very well here.
Which is crazy because, I mean, it was years ahead of PC or Mac.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was...
with multitasking and its music and graphics.
The quality of graphics and sound were well beyond what, like, most 286s could do, or maybe all 286s.
Yeah.
The kind of funny thing is, like, not that long ago, I was flipping through the TV stations, and I went across the public access station, and the public access station was apparently having an outage, and instead of their program, they just had the Amiga Workbench screen, which tells me they are probably running Amiga Workbench to run their public access station still to this day.
I believe it. Which means they haven't switched to HD, but they probably don't need to. Their content probably isn't HD.
It is not. The public access station out here, the only thing I've seen on it, there's someone attempts to do like a horror show, which is kind of like him and his friends dressed like zombies.
Wait, that's not that guy that's going to be at Midwest Gaming Classic, is it?
No. He's on an act. You're talking about Sven Cooley?
Yes.
No, he is an actual media personality on a real television network. And he plays bad horror movies and then, does his character during the intermissions. In the break. So he basically does like bumpers for these horror movies. And then he plays B horror movies. No, this is like people with camcorders running around like the 7-Eleven in monster outfits.
Okay.
Bad homemade stuff. And then there's another show that is 2 dudes talking about pro wrestling that airs after pro wrestling shows.
Wow.
So the fact that I know that show exists means I have to have seen at least one episode, or perhaps exactly one episode.
But the thing is like, isn't podcasting kind of an extension of, like, we're kind of not far from what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm not making fun of the public access people at all. Right?
No.
Like, someone could describe this as 2 dudes talking about video game stuff, right?
And they would be 100% correct.
So I'm not bashing that show. I just, that's what you have on public access. And yeah, podcasting is like that, but possibly cheaper, because I think you have to pay some amount of money to rent public access time, and the public access station has to get an FCC license and blah, blah, blah. All right, so next up, Super Nintendo RGB and DeJitter combo board.
Yeah, so this gives your SNES and RGB out, and it also stops jitter. And I'm not too sure if I know what jitter even is. I just know I don't want it.
But what if you do? What if there's some game you can only beat if you know how to time the jitter?
I hope someone writes in about this.
I think the RGB out mods are very cool. I know there's a big community dedicated to doing this. You know, the site we're linked to is RetroRGB.com. The fact that there can even be a site called RetroRGB.com means there must be a community, of course. But I mean, they've got mods for just about every system available. I sort of wonder, like, what is the advantage of, and this is a question, like, what's the advantage of doing an RGB mod versus, like, a component cable or a component out mod?
Isn't that the same thing?
I don't
Component
think it is.
gives you RGB, right?
Well, component out is like the 5 cables.
Well, you already
RGB is
have
just
your
the
right and left
3.
out, right? So you only need...
You don't have right and left out on the Super Nintendo. You have to, I believe these are different things. This is clearly not an expert on this yet.
See, I wish they would show us a better picture.
I know the port is different because I have a Commodore RGB monitor that I use for gaming, but I don't have anything connected to the RGB port. I have it connected to the regular red, yellow, white port. It does look great even through that. Like, games look really awesome on it. But if I had like an RGB cable, I just going on the fact it's a different cable. Therefore, it must be something different.
Oh no, I think it's I think it is the same thing.
I think it's the same thing, different cable. Well, someone is getting furious at us right now, so
I know.
We'll move on soon. I definitely, like, I have component out cables for Super Nintendo and Genesis that both look great. And the nice thing about those is you don't have to crack open your system to use them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah. But the big deal about this one is usually if you do one, you do the other, and this is all on one board. So, one less step, I guess, if you're modding your SNES.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we link to RetroRGB a lot.
Yeah, I suspect we will. And at some point, they'll listen to the show when they see a link and then say, these guys have no idea what RGB is. I know what the letters stand for. Wait. Okay, no. Game Boy recreated in VERILOG. So over on Hackaday. Hackaday.com. This is essentially running a Game Boy on a Spartan 6 FPGA.
I had to look up what Verilog was. And I learned that it is a language that you use to test your digital circuitry.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped reading because that's where I stopped understanding. I don't know much about circuitry or digital electronics. It's a bucket list thing for me to get into. And when I do, I will emulate my Game Boy on with it.
Mm-hmm. I always thought of it as being close to assembler in terms of language. But again, sort of not in, this is another area that I also need to learn at some point. I've never really thought about doing like FPGA programming. It does seem like kind of a cool idea, but like what the bits of the language I've seen overall kind of, it's maybe halfway between assembler and C is what the language reminds me of.
Well, if you look at the video on this site, they scroll really fast through all the code, and it is insane.
Yeah. Well, even something as simple as the Game Boy is probably thousands of lines of code to emulate, if not 100,000 plus.
And it looks like it might do Game Boy Color. It looks like I'm seeing color on this Zelda. Legend of Zelda. But pretty cool if you're into that sort of thing. I don't know. I think only 2 people I know are into that kind of thing. So I don't know how popular it is.
Maybe one of them wrote this.
Yeah. Or is listening to this podcast. But Launchbox. Just like, I don't know if you guys listened to our first few episodes, but one of our first news items was pretty funny because back then, many weeks ago, Launchbox 9.4 launched, and then the day after, 9.5 launched because it had horrible bugs in it. Now, on March 26th, 9.6 launched with some great features. Now you can download automatically some themes. I won't go into all the improvements, but it's a lot of stuff people have been asking for a long time. And they're finally starting to get to these kind of features. So people are getting pretty excited about this. But it broke your controllers. So the next day, 2 days later, they released version 9.7. And I already see a 9.8 link up here, but the release date is a question mark.
Yes. So it's probably means it's coming soon.
Yes, yes.
So speaking of Launchbox, we're recording this on April 1st. And did you see the April Fool's Day video from, now I don't remember the company, but they were advertising their game launcher. It was a launcher for your game launchers. And I thought it was hilarious because it was one of those things where it really blurred the line between fake and real product.
Yeah, because I could see a use for this.
Right. You have so many game launchers, you need a launcher.
Yeah, yeah. But Launchbox is the one I use to launch. Actually, I use Launchbox to launch RetroArch, which is a game launcher. So I guess I'm kind of already doing that. I try to stay off the internet on April Fool's Day. Almost because I don't want to be embarrassed by believing something.
So a lot of sites have covered this. We'll link to the Kotaku, who I know I mispronounce every single time I say it, article about the Sega Genesis Mini launching on September 19th, which I like the box, but right now I kind of have to label this most unnecessary mini console.
I think it's poor timing.
I don't think it's poor timing. I think it's like already been done. Like this is maybe the thing Nintendo is notoriously scarce with re-releasing games. And maybe this is the exact problem they're trying to avoid, right? Like I have probably, if you count the portable one, 4 different mini Genesis systems that have between 20 and 40 games. I have a PS4 and PS2 Genesis collection. I want a Dreamcast Genesis collection and some PC Genesis collections. So there is, like, for me, absolutely no shortage of ways to play Genesis games on modern television or modern computer. And some of them aren't particularly great quality. You know, some of them maybe aren't awesome, but others are really good quality.
And a lot of these games just came out in that big pack for the Switch.
Yeah. So I think it's the same one that's on PS4, I believe.
Probably, yeah.
Pretty sure it is. It's
now that's not saying anything bad about this. It looks cool.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is I think the PS4 actually has a smaller collection than the PlayStation 2 Genesis collection. So it's kind of weird, but that's where I have a hard time with this one. It's like, if this was the first time, I'd already pre-order it, right? But it's not. It's the 12th variant of a Genesis collection that you can get.
And almost 100% of the people I know who bought either the NES or SNES classics hacked it so they could play Genesis games on it. So they can already do this. You know, they could already play all these games.
So, like, there wasn't a Dollar General near their house or something where they could get one of these Genesis clone systems?
It's almost the principle of the thing. You know, you do it because you can. But, so this brings up a question I was thinking about earlier is, and this is not a joke, I'm being dead serious. How and when do they do one for, like, Sega CD and 32X? You know, do they do an all-encompassing mini?
Well, I
might buy that if it's, you know, the best of the games for each one.
Right. The problem, I think, is that for let's start with the 32X. You know, the games on these systems are mostly, not exclusively, mostly Sega branded games, right? Mm-hmm. So 32X, there's actually not that many Sega games on it. I mean, there's Virtua Fighter, there's Virtua Racing, you know, Knuckles Chaotix, which I don't think anybody wants. I believe
one of the best versions of Space Harrier.
A good version of Space Harrier. So we're up to about 5 games so far. That's not enough for a system. Tempo, I think, is a Sega game.
I'm getting on Wikipedia here.
Okay, well, I'm just going off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But, like, to me,
Afterburner.
Afterburner, which is kind of isn't
not
really
great.
Much better than the Genesis version. Like the real, like the best 32X games, I think, are stuff like it had a great port of Mortal Kombat 2. It had a great port of NBA Jam Tournament Edition. It has Bloodthorn, WrestleMania the arcade game.
Yeah,
right. All of those are licensed.
Probably the best NBA Jam. Yeah.
Yeah. And Sega CD is a similar problem. I mean, you have some great Sega games, obviously like Sonic CD, right? Mm-hmm. But people are going to want like Night Trap and Lunar and Snatcher, and those all require Sega to pay someone for the license. Like on this mini system here, if you look at it, I think Castlevania Bloodlines looks like the only thing on here that Sega doesn't already own. Right, the rest of these I think are all things Sega has it's either theirs or second. And
if you're doing Echo the Dolphin, why not do the CD version so you get the great audio? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that's the problem with the other two ideas, that it's too much.
So what you're saying is, if this was released 3 or 4 years ago, it'd be a no-brainer.
Yeah, or maybe 7 or 8. Like before there was, they put out some new Sega Genesis hardware mini system every single Christmas season. There's just it's maybe a little tweak. Garbage. Almost always. I think the handheld one is pretty good. Overall, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And again, the collections are usually good. Sometimes the music's a little bit off. But for the most part, the collections, like on PlayStation 2, 3, 4, or the Xbox equivalent of those systems, those are always great. Like those, when I say great, I mean like the emulation is really great. We can all debate whether the selection of games is great. I think for the amount you're paying is a pretty good selection.
This controller looks great.
Yeah, I mean, you get an original controller, sure.
I mean, yeah. But I don't think they've released hardware specs. They haven't announced all the games, right?
Yeah, they just said it will have 40 games, and they've announced a small number of them so far. And they're all things, like I said, they're all... Castlevania Bloodlines might not be in most of the other collections, but everything else here is standard fare for the Sega clone systems.
Well, hopefully, unlike the NES Mini, it's not vaporware.
No, but they're taking pre-orders, so... Which is really what Nintendo should have done, too, right? If they took pre-orders, you wouldn't have had the whole, hoarding and whatever problems that they had.
Yeah. And I guess our next story is actually kind of ironic, huh? It kind of proves your point.
Oh, 6 more Sega Ages games announced for Nintendo Switch. Looks like a couple of these are Master System, and do I see the long-lost Great Herzog Zwei on there?
I have never played that game.
It is, if I was to rank the Sega Genesis games, I probably would put that number one.
Really?
Yeah. That game is.
I'll pull that out this week.
And I'm not sure. Like, I think it's aged pretty well. I mean, it's hard to say. Like, just sort of like AV, going back to the AV nerd standards here. Like, it has amazing graphics for the system. Mm-hmm. It somehow does split screen scrolling, which I will mention that when I was learning Sega Genesis development, I accidentally implemented split screen scrolling once. And I think doing it on purpose and doing it well is extremely difficult. But yeah, great graphics, amazing soundtrack. And it's just a very fun premise for a game. I mean, it's like a strategy game, but you don't have to, have a degree in, in accounting or something to manage your army, because it's really action based. It's an action strategy game. So it's as much action as it is strategy. It's probably technically more action than strategy, really. And this has been a long lost game. This was not on Virtual Console. This has not been on any collection. It's probably not going to be on that Sega Genesis Mini.
No. Well, the thing is with this too is because these are in 4x3, they kind of do a MAME type thing where they use the rest of the screen width to show you the controls and some of the system artwork. Mm-hmm. It's pretty nice.
Also on the stuff released this week are some Master System games. Shinobi for Master System, which I think is a great version of Shinobi. Mm-hmm. Wonder Boy and Monster Land. Was that, unfortunately, I'm drawing a blank whether that was Master System or Genesis, because it actually looks more like a Master System game. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure it was. Fantasy Zone was Master System.
That game has great graphics.
Yeah. It was an action, but then G-Lock Air Battle. So if you like the Afterburner games, G-Lock Air Battle is a good one. And that is something that looks really amazing for its time.
Yeah. Well, this is cool. Is there a price here? Let's see if there's a buy. Let me refresh and see if you could buy it.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, Herzog's Wise, like, if you try and buy that on eBay, you're going to have to take out another mortgage on your house, I think. Because it's become a very, very sought-after game. Again, because it's never been re-released that I know of. And I sort of figured maybe it had something to do with the fate of Technosoft. Like, I don't really know what happened to that company, or, their IP's probably owned by, like, some sort of steel engineering firm or something at this point.
Yeah. I don't see this package for sale, so maybe it's not quite out yet.
It says it says announced.
Oh, okay.
So I guess there's still time for someone to claim they own the IP to Technosoft and get it pulled down.
But there are some of these for sale, like you could buy Phantasy Star by itself on Switch. Cool. Is that all our news?
Yeah. And that is a lot. That is by far the most news we've ever had.
Yeah. Our topic of this episode, should we dive right into that?
Yeah, let's go.
So our topic this episode is emulating the Dreamcast. So I really dove into this. I've been looking for an excuse to spend some time with Dreamcast, and this was it. Really, this whole podcast is me looking for excuses to spend time with all this stuff. And so I am one of the rare owners of a GDEMU, and that is it's an SD card, with a chip that you pull out your GD-ROM from your Dreamcast and you put this in, and it has a really cool interface, and you just put CDI or CHD or QBin images on it, and you can play all your Dreamcast games on your Dreamcast and not have to deal with all your discs. I played a lot with that this week, and it was working great. Really, the issues I was having was the output of my Dreamcast. I'll put a link to the GDEMU in our show notes. I'm on the email list for them. It's really just a WordPress site. And the reason why I did that is because he only releases about 100 at a time. And he's not in this time zone, and he's in Europe somewhere. And he starts selling them at odd times. And so you have to have your phone scream at you anytime he posts something. Anyway, he posted that there's a big delay because of Brexit, trying to import some chips. So I thought that was kind of funny that Brexit actually made it into my life that way.
Yeah, now see, I didn't think anything, again, coming from someone who only knows this at a very cursory level, I didn't realize, like, there were actually things that had changed yet. I thought, until they vote on whatever, they're still part of EU and are trying to renegotiate contracts.
That's what I figured also, but...
Yeah, well, it could also be, I don't know, like, if you make some bit of electronics that he needs to make GDEMU, maybe you prioritize shipment of that to places outside of UK because it's less paperwork for you or something. I don't know. There could be a variety of reasons.
Yeah, but I do highly recommend this, and you actually can also upgrade your Dreamcast to do native HDMI out, which I would recommend also because I was trying to use VGA to HDMI 640 by 40, and I think it almost broke my projector. So I switched to Rycast on... Oh, and I should mention that the GDEMU plays every single Dreamcast game. It just depends, like, if you're using your VGA out and you try to play a game that doesn't support VGA, which I think there's only 2 or 3, those won't work. Like, it works like a real Dreamcast, because it is a real Dreamcast. Anyway, so I went from that to Rycast because that's right in RetroArch, and it worked brilliantly. I could do scan lines, I could do, CRT effects on it. I didn't feel any lag. Every game I played great. I read that Crazy Taxi, the car sound wasn't supposed to work. Well, it worked fine for me. There was no jitter. There was no skipping of frames. I have a pretty powerful machine, but I've been told that it can work on Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, it's weird to think about, like, Raspberry Pi being able to run something like Dreamcast, because you think of the Dreamcast as being this big, powerful machine, but then you realize it's now 20-year-old hardware. So, in 1999, the cheapest hardware you could buy was definitely more powerful than the best hardware from 1979.
Yeah. And, and the Dreamcast could emulate SNES and Genesis, which didn't feel that old then, But, to your point, the Dreamcast, like I said last episode, was the first machine that I got that I felt like I was playing an arcade at my house. It felt true to the port, because it was barely a port. The Naomi chipset is the Dreamcast. But anyways, so I fully endorse Rycast. If you know how to use RetroArch, you know how to use Rycast. You just install the core. I highly doubt that the Raspberry Pi will be able to also support all the CRT type effects like scan lines at the same time. But then yesterday I spent a lot of time with another emulator called Demul, DEMUL. It's a standalone emulator. I think it's Windows only. I could be wrong. And it has way more configurations. Not so much like the CRT scan lines and stuff like that, but more like you can upscale stuff. You can make these games look almost modern. If you go on YouTube and search for Demul, There's a great walkthrough of it on how to make your games look great, and they use Shenmue to show it off. And wow, I mean, I think it looks like PS3 quality.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see a side-by-side of that and the Shenmue remake for PlayStation 4. A game that I swore I was going to play the minute I got it, and that is still...
shrink-wrapped.
Still shrink-wrapped, yeah.
Well, and really closing thoughts on the Demule is that I didn't really get into it because it was much more configuration. So out of the box, it did not work great. Spend 5 or 10 minutes, you got it close to looking like Rycast looked. Playing with it for half an hour, it looked totally modern. I couldn't believe my eyes. But you load a different game, then you got to switch your settings to really tweak that game. So if you're looking to get the most out of Dreamcast games, I would go with Demule. And if you're looking just to play them and have everything work perfectly fine, go with Rycast. If you want to go on real hardware, definitely get a GDEMU. There are knockoffs of the GDEMU, and I say don't get those, so don't go on eBay. Go to our show notes. Just because they literally ripped off this guy's design. He has a whole blog post about it. But yeah, did you have any questions or thoughts about emulating on Dreamcast?
No, I haven't really tried emulating Dreamcast yet. Only because I still live in this world where Dreamcast is a cutting-edge system, and there is no possible way I could run a Dreamcast game on my phone. I mean, come on.
And you have one plugged in, right? You have a Dreamcast plugged in, right?
I do. It's right next to me. And it's hooked up to the monitor I'm looking at right here, because it's a normal, HDMI monitor, but it happens to have a VGA port also. That's always weird when you're into retro games and in retro systems. You're like, well, I need a new computer monitor, but it really has to have a VGA port too.
Yeah.
Right? No one makes those anymore, so you really have to search for them. But that's because I have the VGA adapter, which I think looks great. But I would definitely be interested in seeing how some of these looked upscaled. I have 2 Dreamcasts, so I could probably... Dreamcast is still a system. Getting back to GDEMU. It's still a system I find at yard sales fairly often. For a system that didn't do well, there sure are a lot of people in my area selling them.
I think, just like me, the second they announced that it wasn't going to be around anymore, and what did it go down to, $99 or something? You got 2 games? I bought one really quickly. And so I think a lot of people did that. So I'm on eBay right now. There's a knockoff GDEMU. Don't buy it, but it's for $30. But yeah, you could get really nice condition Dreamcast for $50 with controller.
Or substantially less if you drive around a lot in summer.
And yes, and at Walmart they still sell the what are those called? The VMU
units, yeah.
$8 new. I got one last week. So you usually emulate also on the Ouya, right?
Yes, which does not have a Dreamcast emulator that I'm aware of. It is an Android box, though, so I suppose there is a way to do that.
One thing you did mention, too, before was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought you mentioned something about having a cable and a box or multiple cables to do the VGA. And we didn't get a chance to talk about this because my VGA cable is literally just a cable. Just Dreamcast to VGA, and it works fine.
So mine is a box. It looks like a Raspberry Pi case, like a transparent Raspberry Pi case. And it has, you plug the Dreamcast into one end, and then it has a VGA out and a headphone jack out.
Okay.
So it does both, and it's not this, I don't remember if Sega now, I of course don't remember if they made an official VGA cable. This is a third party.
Yeah.
But it works great.
Probably not hard to find.
No, I just bought it. I can't remember the name of the site I bought it from now. I've had it for so long. The site might not even be around anymore. But it was literally just kind of like a GDEMU thing. Someone was just making these and it works great. I might have it could have even been like on Amazon for all I know. It might have just been someone that was reselling, selling their units on Amazon.
Yeah.
But it's not an expensive one to get. It's the dumbest games that don't work. It's like, it's really strange when you find a game that doesn't
I think
work.
it's one of the best games on the system, and it's one of them that doesn't work on VGA. But it did work on Rycast and Demule. That was one I played for a long time this weekend. But yeah, should we get into our game club?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, I'll start with mine just because it's pretty quick. Gauntlet, the originals, 1 or 2, or those are the only 2 I played. I thought I was a fan, but I have to say, did not age well. I just felt like I was playing something that just went in my quarters.
Yeah, well, it did. So for people who aren't familiar with Gauntlet, can't imagine there's anyone listening to this show that isn't, but it's an overhead sort of dungeon crawling game where you have 4 different characters, depending what version you're playing. Mm-hmm. Home version, your mileage will vary on number of characters who have different abilities. So you have an attack ability and a magic ability, and each character is a trade-off of attack, magic, and speed. That's kind of their 3 attributes, I guess. So like every other game,
it's not a fair game. It's not fair.
No, none of the characters, like the Valkyrie character is maybe the most balanced overall. Mm-hmm. The wizard has very good attack, but is kind of slow and weak. The elf is really fast, but again, like really weak attack, not great magic. And the barbarian has a really strong attack, but is so slow that you never want to use him.
Yeah, and in fact, that's who I started using, and this game just frustrated me. Kind of a unique thing about it, though, is I like the Lynx version of it, simply because it was pretty cool that they were able to do it on that system. Have you ever played the Game Boy Advanced Gauntlet Legends?
No, but I was going through my drawer here to see if I have Gauntlet on Lynx since you mentioned it. I may have forgotten that I owned it. The home version I played the most was the NES version.
I think that's what most people did.
I think so. And I actually, you mentioned like the arcade game is designed just to steal as many quarters as it possibly can. The nice thing about the home version is it's not designed for that. It's, the level layout's different. Graphics aren't as good, all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. But it's more accessible. Like, it's not just about constantly killing you or, forcing you to enter more quarters. It was sort of like the first game to have DLC, right? Or DLC isn't really the right term, but like, your character's about to die, pay some money, and they'll heal. The model that every mobile game is now.
Did you ever play Gauntlet 4 on Genesis?
No, I have not, and it's funny because I owned it.
It's a good looking game. I only played it briefly, just so I could talk about it a bit on this podcast, and it has great gameplay and it looks great. It's just, again, it's as unfair as the rest. But if you would, you meaning you, Hugh, or any of the listeners, boot up or play don't spend money on it. Because you'll hunt me down and yell at me. Gauntlet Legends for Game Boy Advanced. It has sound that is so bad that I actually rebooted my computer to make sure there wasn't something going on hardware-wise. And then I went on YouTube to see, like, I'll just check this game out to see why it's not working on my emulator. And no, that's what it sounds like. And I can't even describe the horrors of this bad audio. Apparently it's legendary for how bad it was.
All right, so on further inspection, I do not have Gauntlet for the Atari Lynx, which I now really, really want.
Let's look up some eBay prices on those. So what did you play? You said NES version?
Yes, NES version almost exclusively. That was, I mean, I had it back in the day, played it a ton then. Again, so it is a limited version. I mean, really, the only time I ever played the arcade version more than a minute or two was like if a friend had an Aladdin's Castle birthday party.
Yeah.
I have played it as well a bit on the Midway Arcade Treasures collection. So that's got like the real arcade version.
Yep.
And you, of course, don't have to put quarters in. It's sort of like playing on MAME, except you can play it on your, GameCube or PlayStation 2.
So that is, it wants to eat your quarters, even though there are no quarters.
There are no quarters. You just have to keep hitting, I think it's left trigger to insert more quarters. And this is, I believe, also on the original PlayStation Midway Collection 2. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, man, in 1996, how can you possibly emulate an arcade game on a home console? That's crazy.
Yeah, I'm getting, 20 games for $40. Oh my gosh. Well, this, okay, so Gauntlet, for the links, I'm seeing Third Encounter here. I'm seeing the original for $5 unboxed, and I'm seeing Third Encounter for sealed $45 or $5 unboxed. So pretty cheap.
That is not bad. I may pick up, I do have a functional links, so a loose copy of Gauntlet sounds like fun.
And it works with the cable, the link cable.
Mm-hmm. So I just need a link cable and another human being who owns a Lynx.
Yes.
Good.
I wonder if you can make an Ethernet adapter for the link cable and make it work with, I could use my RetroPie and we could play over the internet.
Mm-hmm. That
probably not.
Does not sound like fun.
No. I don't think I have anything else to say about this game other than I don't think I'm going to play it again. I think I dove into that nostalgia and it has not aged well.
I think I would play it if I saw a free play cabinet and 3 other people interested in playing it.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Your game.
Yeah, so
Club game.
Sticking with Dreamcast, I'm going to go with Crazy Taxi. So I talked about it last week, teased it a little bit. And it's a game, I played the Dreamcast version. I also have it on PlayStation 2. And then I have like some sequel to it on the PSP. I think Crazy Taxi Fair Wars it's called, where you're like in Las Vegas and stuff. But no, the original... I know it's arcade original, but I always consider the Dreamcast like the true original version of this game because it's a almost direct port of the arcade game. I mean, you hadn't played the arcade game enough, but it's pretty hard to tell the visual difference between the arcade and Dreamcast version.
It's a really good looking game.
Yeah. So, again, for people who aren't familiar, the premise is you are a cab driver. There's 3 different cab drivers to choose from. And you're working in a hypothetical city in California. I think it's supposed to be based off San Francisco, based on some of the like mountains and stuff. But again, it's sort of generic California city, really, is the vibe I got off it. And you're driving around and you're on a timer, so you've got to work fast. And you see people standing on the curb trying to hail a taxi, and they have different color circles around them. And the color circle represents kind of like how much money you can make off them. So green means it's like a really long fare. You got to drive a long distance, but you'll make a lot of money. Then yellow, orange, red. Red is like short trip. I mean, literally there are people who like want to get to the KFC across the street. Mm-hmm. I don't know who does that. I have taken an Uber for a very short distance before. Only because like, have you ever done that where like you're in a city you don't know? And then like you call
just
a cab.
Don't want to get lost. Yeah,
you flag a cab. You're like, hey, take me to this building. Yeah, and they're like, the building's right over there.
Yeah, that has happened to me.
So I think that's what's happening in Crazy Taxi. But instead of giving them directions, you drive them across the street to the KFC.
And sometimes through a park.
Yep.
Over a ramp.
Underwater, you can do.
Mm-hmm.
You and the car survive underwater just fine, apparently. So you earn money by getting the passenger there quickly and without getting in any accidents. Now, if you do kind of like exciting stunts, they tip you a little bit more. But if you crash, it takes money off. It also takes time. Like when you pick up the passenger, there's like they have a timer of how long they're willing to wait to get to their destination. If you don't get there in time, they leave the cab and you don't make any money. So that's just it. And you basically play until the timer runs out. And I'm sure if I looked, there is probably like someone that did a 24-hour marathon of Crazy Taxi at some point.
That's crazy.
I don't know if there is.
That's
I'm
insane.
making that up. I'm just saying.
Oh, okay.
I just say it wouldn't surprise me if, there are these people who do like the 24-hour gaming marathons for charity. It would not surprise me if somebody had some ludicrously long Crazy Taxi game.
Now, the music in this I do like, but, I really like the soundtrack, Offspring and other pop-punk bands like that, but it would drive me crazy after a few hours.
That's part of that is the one downside to playing this game again. Is the songs are really good, but there's really only kind of like 4 songs, which is great for playing in the arcade, right? Because you're not playing for more than 10 minutes and all. I mean, if you played Crazy Taxi for 10 minutes, you were awesome at Crazy Taxi.
How much money have you made? Like, what do you think your high score is?
Oh, I don't think I've ever gotten better than like a Class C license. I'm not like it's this weird thing. I really enjoy racing games, but I'm not very good at them.
Yeah, same. I think I've only made like $3,000 or something in this.
Yeah, and that's probably not great. So,
what about the stunts? What's that part called?
Yeah,
Crazy Box or something?
Yeah, Crazy Box, and that's just a variety of like. This is why I'm bad at racing games. I can't do the stunts. They're like, here, do a power drift and do a blah blah blah. And you earn, a trophy. I can't do any of that stuff. I'm also a very safe driver in real life, too, so maybe that's part of the problem. If you believe Twin Galaxies as a credible source, the record for Crazy Taxi might be 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Wow.
With $115,000 earned.
I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm playing for 5 to 10 minutes, and that's like a good game for me.
Yeah, now the Dreamcast version, and I assume the other home versions, have an option where you just say, I want to play for 10 minutes, and then the timer doesn't matter. Like the customer's timer still matters, but there's no overall game timer that you have to try and earn. So, anyways, this is a pretty easy game to get. If you don't, you probably have some system that you can play Crazy Taxi on. It's on kind of every system of the zeros.
It's for Steam. You could get it for like $2.
Yeah, 78 cents probably on a Black Friday sale. Even like Dreamcast rare system. I see Dreamcast copies for under $10, and lots of sequels, of course, if that's your thing. But yeah, you can get the original Dreamcast or PS2 version for under $10. It looks like.
Yeah. Well, I don't have much more to say about this game. It's a really simple game. It is fun. If somehow you haven't played it, you really should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think this is, it's kind of right. I don't know what the cutoff is for retro anymore. And this kind of feels like it's on the edge, but it was on the Dreamcast, and I figured Dreamcast is fair game, and I think we're entering the era, I have a feeling PlayStation 5 will be announced this year. Seems to me that would move the PlayStation 2 era stuff into retro status too.
So do you think GameCube is retro?
I kind of do. I mean, if you think about it, it's now, how many systems has Nintendo made since the GameCube?
3?
4.
4. Wait.
All right, well, hold on.
GameCube, Wii U, Switch, right?
Yeah, so 3. I was counting the GameCube itself, which wasn't a very good metric. So yeah, it's 3 systems behind now for Nintendo. So, like, that's the equivalent of during the Wii era saying the Super Nintendo is retro, which seems valid.
Yeah, I might work with some people that were born when the GameCube was launched, so...
Oh, I definitely
guess
do.
it's retro. Yeah. Well, do we have some listener feedback about any of these games?
Yeah, at some point I will share some stories of, like, adventures with coworkers that made me realize I'm very old. Majors wrote in about past and present games. Also wanted to start with a little shout out to Jazz and Zip drives. And he was noting that he had a friend that had a Bernoulli drive, which I don't think I've even seen one of these in person before. But at the time, that was like the cutting edge, like, largest storage thing you could get for your computer. And he's just commenting that his first CD burner that he bought was $800.
Yep.
That's why I always note, this is why Sega CD and TurboGrafx CD games have zero copy protection. Because when those games were made, you had to drop $800 for a CD burner.
Yeah, and I had, around that time, I was selling computers out of the back of a guitar store, and I had a Visual Basic 3.0 job where we had to burn our code to CDs, and I was in a band at the time, so I was actually burning our stuff to CDs and handing out CD audio back then, and wow, people thought, you have a CDR, your band must be huge.
Huge, yeah, signed by Geffen or something. Yeah.
Copying PlayStation games for people, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. PlayStation game, even PlayStation doesn't have copy protection on the discs, do they?
You needed a chip. You could copy them, but it didn't copy the bad sector.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, because you can rip PlayStation games without any special. Like I can't put a Dreamcast game in my PC and have the PC recognize it as anything.
No.
Bonk's Revenge. So he was a big fan of Bonk's Revenge. It came on the 4-in-1 disc bundle, right? And just that it was a really, really great platform for the time. And he does not like the mechanic of repeating headbutts to rack up points. Which, that's actually what I like. And then Bust a Move misheard me and thought we were talking about Buster Brothers, which is another... He's got a lot of TurboGrafx on the mind if you're thinking of Buster Brothers. But still Bubble Bobble, as he knows it, is fine for a basic puzzle game. It's not Magic Drop, Tetris Attack, or even Tetris, but it is, perfectly serviceable. Let's talk about Taito F3 multi-board, too, here. I have to... Okay, sorry, I was reading... I was reading this in real time while digesting Taito F3 multi-board and thinking, what is that? I don't think I'm familiar with those.
I think it's like Sega Saturn era.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah,
anyway.
That's fine. No, I just wasn't familiar with that. And then let's see here. Feedback on a few other topics. Google Stream Console. Not interested other than hacking it to be an emulation box. Was curious about your 8-bit DOE controller.
Yeah.
And whether or not you noticed any lag while using it.
Yeah, so I have USB cable. I have a drop ceiling here, so I just run through the ceiling along USB from my desktop to me. So I just instantly plug everything in. I didn't want to do that, but the first Bluetooth controller I tried using had lag. And I just kind of said I'm done with this until I need it again. So sorry, I didn't test it like that at all.
Talks a little bit about VASM. Again, appreciates techie segments, even though some of it goes over his head. By the way, a lot of it goes over my head. That's the secret here.
But it's cool. He was in a Turbo C back in the day in college. I started programming on Turbo Pascal.
Wow. I did not use Turbo C, but I do have a Turbo C book here. I learned regular C at some point. Most of my college stuff was C++. In Turbo C, I just never... I think I kind of got into it. I don't know. I must have known just where I went to school. I don't think there's anything more than that.
I think it was a bit older than that. A lot of Baltimore systems were written in Turbo C or Turbo Pascal, or there's probably a Turbo Basic for all I know.
Well, I'm sure there's a Turbo Dash any language you can name.
I think it was the company, right? Or was it the spec of the compiler?
Well,
I don't know.
I thought Turbo C was a Borland, you know.
I think it got bought by Borland.
Okay, I could buy that. Whatever it is, I'm sure even if Borland owned it, it was heavily pirated, especially on colleges. So I know that Borland, like some company, I don't want to go into the whole details why, but I know some company with a really long, some company with a really long name, like so it's not like Embarcadero, bought all the Borland stuff and still supports, the old Borland languages, including stuff like Turbo Pascal. I only know this from like knowing other developers, some of whom are stuck like maintaining Turbo Pascal programs from whenever they were written.
Everything you said is totally correct. You were pretty much reading Wikipedia in real time. Well, you were talking, and my eyes were going over Wikipedia sentences of exactly what you were saying.
Yeah, there's a really I can't go into a podcast why I know all this Borland nonsense right now. Anyhow, feedback on games of the week from Majors. Gauntlet, similar feedback to what you're saying, that it took his money so fast he never played it very much, and that he only saw it at pizza parlors, so the joysticks were always gross. Yes. Arcade games in pizza parlors are always gross. He was not a big fan of Crazy Taxi. He enjoys racing games, but not so much the fetch quest, mission games. So I guess like probably not a big GTA fan either. And at one point, he did have a sit-down arcade cabinet in his garage that he was storing for a friend. I love those stories. Like, I'm just trying to figure out the situation where someone's like, hey, dude, can I drop off a Crazy Taxi sit-down arcade cabinet in your garage?
Oh, I've done that because you run out of space and you don't want to pay for storage. So you act like you're doing someone a favor, but they're doing you a favor. It's one of two things. You ran out of space or your wife doesn't know about it yet.
Yeah, I don't know how she wouldn't notice a Crazy Taxi machine in the garage.
No, because it's not in your garage. It's in your buddy's garage. Get what I'm saying?
Oh, it's in the buddy's garage. I see. Aha. Oh, you're hiding. I get it now. You're hiding the Crazy Taxi cabinet from your spouse.
Your purchase that she doesn't know about.
That's not going to end well.
No. Bennett writes in, he mentioned that he thought the Z80 CPU wasn't the TI-99, but it was a TI CPU, and that he's very, very familiar with assembly because he's been programming for the TI-83. And let us know what you're programming for that. I'm pretty interested in that. And also, why you pick the TI-83 if you had some nostalgic value for you or something different.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, it should have been super obvious to me that the TI computer would be using a chip TI made. So one of my generation gap experiences was talking to a coworker, and the topic of like, where did you learn how to program came up. And they mentioned they started on, I believe this is a TI-89. And I'm like, oh, you mean like a TI-99? I use that. They must be... I was just sort of thinking like the TI-89 must be some mythical computer that slightly predates the TI-99. Because obviously, right, they're just 10 apart.
Yeah.
And then as they were talking about it and like the things they programmed on, I'm like, that sounds more sophisticated than the TI-99. What exactly are you talking about? And they're like, oh, it's this graphing calculator I had in, AP Calculus in, 1998. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's a 68K processor with, I think, like 10 megahertz, something like that.
Yeah. It was, I believe, more horsepower than the TI-99, but of course, the entire time they're describing this thing, and I'm picturing the TI-99.
Yeah.
Not realizing, overpriced graphing calculator. There's no, wait till your kids are in high school. There is no worse ripoff in the world than graphing calculators. Because, like, everything that graphing calculator does could be a 99-cent Android program. But what TI's...
Microsoft just open sourced it.
The open source calculator. But the point is, like, what TI has done has managed to negotiate with like the SAT governing body or whatever, saying only our calculator can be used on the SATs. And that means all the schools standardize on their calculator, which again is less powerful than a 99-cent app on the Android store, except it costs $130.
Yeah.
Pure
Probably
evil
cost them
as far as I'm
$2 to
concerned.
make. Yeah.
Our sponsor this week, TI. Zach also writes in about the TI-99 processor. I have to be very careful before talking about processors ever again. He wants to... He was asking if we knew that it was technically a 16-bit processor. And no, I did not know that. I knew like the Intellivision is technically a 16-bit processor. But anyways, our episode talking about assembler and TI-99 got him into the rabbit hole of looking at old assembly language manuals. You can find a lot of those on archive.org. Sometimes you can get them for like $1 on eBay too, depending what language you're interested in. And he says the jumping off point for this is relevant to the Apple II. He read somewhere that by using the unusual 64:1 and 8:1 combined interleaving for display modes, Steve Wozniak saved 2 4-bit adders on the motherboard. Which
when you sell that many, it's a lot of chips, so they probably saved a lot of money.
Yeah, I assume so. So that made him curious because he said he did a lot of programming on a Apple II clone called the Laser 128, but mostly in BASIC. Sort of went back, started learning some 6502 for it, and was, he says, both fascinated and frustrated by the way they did graphics memory. And it took a while until he went back and learned this history. It didn't make sense why they did it that way. He recommends a book called Code, The Hidden Language of Computer Hardware and Software. It is available on archive.org for free. We should include a link somewhere, but if we don't, go to archive.org and search for Code. It's all one word. It's just archive.org/details. Code, the hidden language of computer hardware and software.
And also a YouTube channel called Retro Game Mechanics Explained, which, we'll link all this in our show notes. Mainly focused on NES and SNES, but it's fascinating to watch. And the guy that puts up the videos does some deep dives into some different graphic modes on SNES and how the controller works. And thanks for sending this. I'm going to check these out. And Zach, if you haven't, check out the book Assembly Lines. I hear a lot of people talking about it for Apple II coding. I guess it really walks you through and really makes you understand it in a human readable way. And if you don't know about K-Fest, Kansas Fest, it's a 5-day Apple II Fest that's been going on since the 90s in Kansas City. And they launched some amazing things there, and you should check it out. But thanks for those links.
Yeah, I'm Googling Chicago to Kansas City right now because I'm very... you mentioned this early on, and how we should probably interview these people.
Absolutely, yeah.
8-hour drive, but it's mostly through Illinois, so no. Hey, so if people want to email us to talk about past or future games, where do they do that?
Email at retrogameclub.net. That is email at retrogameclub.net. And you can email us about anything, your projects, anything retro video game or emulation related, coding related. We love these suggestions for these books and these videos. I'm going to check out both of these things. And I had a suggestion about, if you know how to, or if you have a system on how to manage all your many retro controllers in your emulation setup, we're asking for help here. We need advice. Email at retrogameclub.net, and we have new Game Club games we have to pick.
Yes, and I'm going to go with an arcade game that I did not play back in the day, but I have played quite a bit in recent years, and that is Mappy.
Yeah, very famous game. I'm excited to dive into that. I've only played it a few times. I have a buddy that has the cab, and anytime I go over his house. It was one of those games, yeah, it didn't attract me when I was a kid. So I never really jumped on it.
Yeah. I'll talk about that next time. Same kind of like first impression, like, oh, this is just some silly little kids game. And then as I was older and started trying it, I found it's actually a really fun game.
Do you know where they could find it now? Steam or any?
You can get it on Steam, on probably Steam. I don't know for a fact whether or not you can get it on Steam. It's on a lot of collections. There's a lot of home versions, and they're these convenient little miniature cabinets that you can get at Target. I'm holding one right now, which is one of my preferred ways to play this. It's a little miniature My Arcade version. And,
oh, wow.
yeah, I got this at Target. It was on sale. I don't know, it was like $15, something like that. And it's not the arcade ROM in here, but it's something pretty close to it. I actually couldn't figure out what... It's something that, like, seems better than NES, but maybe below arcade, and I can't quite figure out what they actually put in here. That's my preferred way to play it nowadays.
My game is Windjammers, simply because Windjammers, the sequel came out. It's a modern Windjammers, but Windjammers is a Neo Geo game where you are... It's kind of a Frisbee-type game. Pong meets Frisbee. It's on Neo Geo. It's on the Switch, PlayStation 4, Vita, Virtual Console. Pretty much everywhere.
I assume it is on the SNK Arcade collection for PlayStation 2. I will verify if it is by trying it.
Yes.
Yeah, I assume it is.
That is my Game Club game, and I think that wraps it up, right?
Yeah, I think it's everything. So again, email at retrogameclub.net, and thanks for listening.